Okay, so no abandonment. We won't look at that. Let's talk about confidentiality. Patient confidentiality is huge. That's that thing that's on that paperwork that you guys signed, and I got the ugly face. Don't break patient confidentiality, right? If you know somebody in the hospital, let's say they're in the ER, they come in the ER, and they come in and let's pick on cheerleaders. Let's say one of the cheerleaders in the school came in and she's coming into the emergency room with trouble with urination, burning with urination, blah, 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 blah. And you go in there and you go, oh, there's a cheerleader. And you overhear the nurse saying, we need to test you for an STD. All right? And then you go out and you take that and run with it and you go, whew, go out to a secluded place in your phone and saying, time to blow this up, and Twitter and text and whatever else you guys do, right? It's like, Susie has an STD, she's in the hospital, yada, 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 right? That's a breach, and that's a huge breach in patient confidentiality. Then you come back later and find out, nope, Susie didn't have an STD, she had a urinary tract infection. Big difference, right? The harms is the same. You could have texted you had a urinary tract infection. You still breach patient confidentiality. Let me give you that. This is a real life story here. Lady, the registrar lady in the hospital, the person that signs you in, a friend of hers from church came into the emergency room with something. She signed her in. She went, a good friend, signed her in to the hospital, right? Then she picked up the phone and called the pastor, people from the church. And the people from the church showed up before the family showed up. And so the family got there and was asking, how did you guys get here so fast? And then they told her the story. Well, Mary Jean called us from the registrar's office. She works there. Boom. Huge violation of patient care, right? Fired. Boom. Axe dropped. They looked at that and said, oh, geez. Fired her that day.
What if the patient said that was fine?
Now that's the difference. That's giving consent. But as you guys, you won't go there. If you see someone, especially if you see someone that you know in the hospital, they don't care. It doesn't matter if they said, oh, go call. Or let the guys know that I'm okay. Yeah, just like, we can't do that.
What if you were working in the ER and your dad got targeted, and if you call your uncle, would you still be violating them?
Well, that's a good scenario. Technically, yes. Yeah, because you are not the daughter in that certain situation. You are the health care provider. Now, you turn that around, and the uncle shows up, and your dad didn't want the uncle to be there. And now he's wondering how the uncle got the news. And they point to you, and then you lose your job, whether it's your family or not. You got to have, if you have consent, it's a little different. But still, I wouldn't breach that. You know, I'd hand them the phone and say, you call them or whatever.
But does that only go with people like outside of the hospital? Like, could you tell other doctors what's going on with the person?
No, good question. Breaching confidentiality. If they don't have the need to know, it's a breach in confidentiality. They have to have the need to know. Now, if I'm the doc in the ER and I called in a cardiologist, I can tell that cardiologist because he's going to be a doctor or the other nurse, right? If you see something, you're working with the patient in the emergency room and you go up to the third floor to visit your friend and you say, hey, we got this, we got John Smith down in the emergency room. you just breached that confidentiality. That person on the third floor didn't need to know that information. So you breached the patient confidentiality there. So you've got to think about this. Being on the elevator is another one. You're on the elevator, you're going up there and say, oh, you couldn't believe that old nasty guy that was in the ER. He had that, he had 10-day-old clothes on and he's urinated all over himself and, he has poo everywhere. And he was nasty. His toenails were so long they curved over the top of his feet. Person behind you happens to be a family member. They say, by the way, that's my dad you're talking about. Oh, you're gone. You violate that confidentiality in a public area. Never, ever, ever talk about patient care out in the public, where the public is. We bring up a lot of things in here, but all we bring up is the stories, the facts. They're true. Most of them are true. All right? But we bring up just the medical condition, not anything associated with the patient whatsoever. So we'll work on that. We'll practice. We'll work on that as far as making sure that you guys are very well aware of this whole patient confidentiality thing. It's very important. One other thing that you want to do, this happened last year, year before. We were doing CPR on the patient. One room, the patient died. Typical thing. No really big deal. I mean, it happens. We go outside and the students were sort of excited about doing compressions. First time they did compressions, they were a little hyped up about it, and they looked excited about it. And one of the nurses had to come by and say, hey, it's not a huge thing, but you guys looked like you were really enjoying yourself when you come out of the room doing the CPR. And I understand the whole thing about doing CPR and all that, but the family was right behind you. And they're sort of curious why that you look so happy when you come out of a room when you're doing compressions on their family member that's no longer living. See the dilemma there?
You say, I'm happy that I tried to accomplish.
No. That would be one of the times that you would just keep your mouth shut and not say anything. All right? Because everything you said would have been bad. So nothing would have helped what you said. So those are special circumstances, different circumstances that you look at. We'll talk about a lot. We'll have 6 weeks of talking about patient confidentiality to make sure that you guys are locked on, that you're very careful with what you do. When you come back to the hospital, we can talk about what you've done in the hospital. That's fine. The things that you've seen, that's fine. You can tell your mom and dad what you've seen in the hospital, as long as what you've seen doesn't identify anybody. No names. Leave the age out. Nothing like that. Yeah, we saw this guy, he had this huge infection on his butt, and it was gross. So you can talk about that sort of thing. Talk about what you did in treatment, but be careful not to identify the patient. Questions? Very good. Another thing is reportable events, like dog bites, things like that, child abuse. We won't really get into that too much. Organ donors. I'm an organ donor. I don't know if you're at age where you can be an organ donor, but
Now when you get your license.
Once you know your license.
can you be an organ donor? You don't need them. Save a life. Something tragic happens to me, I don't need my heart, right? I don't need my liver, anything like that. I just don't need it. So there's a lot of rules and things that go along with organ donation. Some of the organs are not good after CPR or after trauma, but the eyes and the skin. Yes, I don't need my skin, right?
What if the person smokes?
Yeah, they probably won't take their lungs, their throat, or anything like that. But organ donation is a good thing. Don't think about them peeling your skin off. You don't need it. That patient that's burned to a crisp needs your skin. right? But you don't need it anymore. Organ donation is pretty simple. To me, personal opinion, again, it's just being greedy to hang on to your organs after you pass. If your organs are still good, take them. I don't need them. No function. Watch out for these medical devices. You see medical tags, some look like allergic tags, seizure tags, diabetic tags, something to alert you that the patient's there. And then we won't get into a lot of documentation right now, but you will have documentation to do, and we'll go through that, and we'll show you how to do some documentation as well.
Is that where you like write down